Welcome everyone to Nerd of the Rings. I have a very special guest with me today, Mr. Viggo Mortensen. Viggo, thank you so much for taking the time out to join us and talk about your new film.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Now, I am someone who grew up on westerns. I love westerns, and I really enjoy seeing you in westerns. By the way, now
No,
previously,
thank you.
I think of movies like Hidalgo and Appaloosa, and now, of course, you've got The Dead
Mhm.
Don't Hurt. What is it about the Western genre that appeals to you and seems to bring you back every once in a while?
Well, I mean, like you, and like pretty much all kids in my generation, not just boys, but girls as well. We grew up watching them, whether you were crazy about them or not. That's what was on. There were a lot of Western TV series. We're talking about the 1960s. On TV, you could see Westerns. They would put old Westerns on TV, especially weekends and stuff, I remember. And you could still go to the movie theater and see a new Western once in a while, in the early 60s at least, until about the mid 60s. And it's never fully died away, but certainly the end of the golden era where it was a real staple in terms of film going, that kind of ended in the early 60s, really. That last really big year of the classic Western was probably like 62, Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, movies like that. But there was some unusual beginning of sort of new takes on the Western that were happening too. And that continued. But anyway, yeah, I grew up watching them, and I also grew up riding horses when I was very little. Probably the same time I started going to the movies, about
Yeah.
3, 4 years old. I was riding horses, so I liked them. I liked the outdoors. I like those kinds of landscapes they showed in those movies, and I partly grew up on in the countryside and this was South America, so it was gauchos were like the cowboys, But even down there, I mean, all kids down there were watching American westerns.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just natural. I've always sort of been interested in them. Like most genres, most of what's made is not great, and because so many westerns were made throughout the history of westerns, for the first, I don't know, 60 years or so,
Yeah.
um, of its 50 years of its history, 1,007, 8,000, I don't know.
Yeah.
Most of them are bad. Most of them are
Yeah.
not very original. They're very kind of by the numbers. You see the same
Yeah.
plot lines, same kind of dialogue, same kind of situations repeated over and over again. Not very original, but every once in a while, someone made a great western. Something that
Yeah.
was at the highest level of in terms of movie making or even just literature. There's some great western stories out there. So I enjoy watching them now and then again, and obviously in preparation to make The Dead Don't Hurt. I rewatched all the ones I remember liking a lot, but I also watched tons and tons of bad ones. Not
Mm.
so much because for the stories, but for details that we could use. It could be an inspiration, trying to find stories that showed the way people looked, the way they behaved, the way they rode horses, the way the buildings looked inside and out, streets, towns, in uh, in that period, of our movie. It's from 1861 to 1865, and the classic western really is supposedly takes place in the United States, can be Canada, but in the western part of North America, from the beginning of the Civil War until 1890. That's the sort of the
Yeah.
classic western. And of course, there are many ways of making westerns. You could say that lots of road movies and different kinds of stories set in different parts of the world. People call them westerns, and you could say that. But the classic western is from that period, and that's what we were trying to make. Even though it's unusual, our story, it's got a woman at the center of it, which is already unusual.
Yeah.
And but the way we filmed it and the attention to detail in terms of the production design, costumes, the way people speak, the way they ride, the way everything looks and sounds, it's it's meant to be. We try to keep within the lines in terms of traditional westerns. You know,
Yeah.
simple, elegant photography, details as correct as possible.
Yeah.
And that was fun researching that. So we watched between me and the production designer, costume designer, cinematographer, some of the actors. You know, I'd watch really old westerns from the beginning, like the silent period.
Mm. Yeah.
There's some westerns you see a lot of the streets and the buildings and the saloons and the saddles and the way people ride. I mean, those people that were working in those westerns, that wasn't too long after the events they're depicting. So, you know,
Right.
there are a lot of things that were really correct. You know, you look at a movie like even later on in this, you know, after the silent period, and say John Ford's Stagecoach,
Hmm.
his first big movie.
Yeah.
Just the details in the street at the beginning, the way people are dressed. There's a lot of interesting things in there that are probably more accurate than what you see in some westerns made today.
Yeah. Now,
So we borrowed where we could.
yeah. Now, you mentioned, how for a long time there was a lot of westerns made, and nowadays it's a lot more sparse. And some folks, it seems like there's always folks saying like, oh, western is a dead genre, and then a new western comes up that does something original, like Dead Don't Hurt. Like you said,
Hmm.
it's very unique. The way the film is edited is unique. The fact that you have a woman at the center, which Vicky Creeps does an amazing job in this movie, by the way.
Yeah,
So, folks, if
she's
you haven't
awesome.
seen it, you should totally watch the movie. Absolutely, go watch The Dead Don't Hurt. Did you run
Mhm.
into kind of that resistance of westerns when you were seeking to make this film? Like, did you run into that that stigma that it's kind of you know a more of a dead genre?
Well, we were actually quite lucky. It's unusual, especially nowadays. It's harder and harder for truly independent original movies um, that aren't really formulaic or don't have a bunch of tons of movie stars and effects and things. Um, it's harder and harder to make independent movies and actually get them into a movie theater. It's harder and harder. But I have to say, we were and to find the financing. You have to cobble it together from many different places usually. But in this case, we were fortunate. There was a producer, one of our producers, Regina Solorzano of Mexico, from a company called Talipot. She read this and another sort of Western that I wrote. And she really liked this. She liked them both, but she said, we will get behind this. And almost all the money came from there in one shot, which is
Oh, wow.
extremely unusual these days. So I didn't have that problem. We just had the problem of the usual, logistics and trying to figure out how best to use the budget we were able to come up with or find with them. And which meant we couldn't shoot in the United States because it would have been too expensive. Um, and we had a very limited amount of days to shoot it. I think the movie, I mean, I'm very happy with the way it turned out and the way we all worked together. I think it's a movie that looks like we had a lot more time, a lot more, like a couple more weeks than we really did, and a lot more money than we did. But that's just because we had such a good team and we prepared so well. So yeah, no, I didn't. We didn't have that
Yeah.
resistance you're talking about. Although it's and then it's later. It's a question of placing it and finding distribution, and that took a
Yeah.
little longer. Even though we got great reviews and great reactions, and Vicky as our main character, she hasn't had a bad review yet anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, it was still in some places it was difficult at first to find distribution, but we gradually have, and it's done. It's done well. It's done particularly well in Europe and um, really well Spain, France, Scandinavia, and got really good reactions in the United States and other places as well. And it continues to roll out. It came out recently in Germany. It's coming out in Italy, and so it's been a longer journey getting it out there than actually making it, in a way.
Wow. Now, for the film, for those watching this that might not know, so you served as the writer, director, producer, actor, and composer. Let me know if I'm missing anything there. That seems like plenty to be going on with. Now, what was it like
Mm.
fulfilling all these roles on a single film? Were you able to kind of flip from one hat to the other, or did you kind of have all of this in your mind at all times?
Um, well, I mean, I wrote it. I started writing it during the pandemic in 2020, and then in early 2021, I was started looking for financing, and sometimes it takes several years. Like with the first movie I directed, Falling, it took me 4.5 years before I found the money to shoot. And even then, we didn't find all of it. We had enough for the first couple of weeks. We decided to just start and hope that the rest would come in, which it fortunately did. In this case, we found it fairly quick. By the end of 2021, we had the money promised that we needed to shoot, you know. And but as soon as I had a script that worked, then of course you're sharing it with other people, with Vicky, with cinematographer, production design, and it starts undergoing certain changes. Also, when we started looking for locations, when I found the places we could shoot that looked right and that we could afford to shoot in, then you change certain scenes. So that evolved. I wasn't going to work in it as an actor. That didn't happen until quite late. The music I composed and we recorded most of it, many months before we started shooting. It was just something that had worked for me in Falling, and in this case, it served as a guide, to the way we were going to shoot certain scenes, the rhythm of them, the duration, and even kind of shots.
Yeah.
And then I shared that music with the team, cinematographer and other people, just so they could feel what the mood was supposed to be, what the tempo was supposed to be in certain sequences. And it was really helpful. And obviously in editing, it was even more helpful because we already had that for pacing and for the feel, for certain characters and certain situations. And yeah, I mean, I'm always, even as an actor, I've always been interested in everything that's going on. I mean, when we were shooting Lord of the Rings, I was hung around. I was there working almost every day anyway, but I loved watching how this enormous team worked in each department, how they all collaborated, and there was no problem they couldn't solve, and it was just a question of teamwork, really, and foresight. And I learned a lot from that experience, and I tried to put it to use the first time I directed. And in this case, we really had to prepare a lot. There was a lot of things to do. We were shooting a lot outside. Some locations were tricky and so forth and all that. So, but it's all something that you do together with people. It's not like I'm sitting there
Right.
deciding everything. I mean, the final responsibility for what you see on screen and what you hear is mine. And as I say, as an actor, there was another actor that was paired with Vicky, and he was with us for several months, and suddenly I don't know why, he just decided to do something else. So I tried to replace him with someone his type and age, and who was well known enough that the financier would say, yeah, that's still okay. And there were people that liked it a lot, but they just weren't available. It was a little too late. So in the end, after consulting with Vicky to see if she was okay with it, I said, well, I could do it, but we have to change the character. So we did that.
Mm.
Made him significantly older and just different. And I went to whatever seemed the easiest path of least resistance. So since he was supposed to be European, I made him Danish because I speak the language and understand that culture and that country's history. So that's what happened there. But it was a real great team effort, and we actually finished shooting a day before we were supposed to, and came in a little under budget, which was great. It's a tribute to the teamwork.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned some of your experience on Lord of the Rings and learning from the folks there. I mean, no doubt, anytime you do a project, do a film, you carry on something or learn something, or you take a piece of that experience with you. What do you think that you'll carry on from The Dead Don't Hurt as you move forward in your career?
Um, well, I mean, no matter how well you prepare, there are always unforeseen problems. I mean, that's what making movies is about. It's about solving little and big problems every day. Um, but if you have prepared really well and everybody's in sync, then when those problems come up, nobody really freaks out. They're like, okay, well, what do we do about this? We could do this or we could do that. And then you come to a consensus and you move forward. So I guess it's always learning how to best function as a team. I suppose I learned on the first movie I did, Falling, and then on this one a little more, what works in certain situations. And all the actors are different always, whether they're little kids or adults. Every actor has different needs, and every actor is different on a given on each day. It depends how they start their day, how they feel. There may be things about a certain scene they have to do that feels daunting to them, and you didn't realize that. And it's just communicating. It's not shutting yourself off. One thing I've learned from the really good directors I've worked with over the years is it's really important to have an open line of communication and to make that clear from the beginning. It's not like sort of halfway through the shoot, someone says, well, I wish I could have talked to you earlier about, and you say, well, you could have always talked to me. You have to make that clear in the beginning. So I always done that in both movies I've directed. The first day, certainly before the first shot, I'd say it to the whole crew assembled, but I make it clear even before that, during the pre-production, during the preparation of the shoot, is that a good idea can come from anybody, anytime,
Yeah.
anywhere, and don't hesitate. Don't tell me about this great idea you have for a scene we're working on. Don't tell me a couple days from now, oh, that scene we were shooting on Monday, if you'd done this. So, well, it's too late now. We can't go back and shoot it again. So it's just making everybody aware that they're not there just for their technical ability or some particular task they're good at. They're there as a member of a team that's telling a story, and what they feel and think about the way the story is being told as you go along is important. It's not just a particular job they're doing. It's like everybody's involved in everything in a way, if they want to be. And what happens there is you not only are more efficient as a filmmaking team, but people feel like it's not just another job, another shoot. They feel valued in a way that's genuine. It's
Yeah.
practical. It's like, okay, well, let's all solve this together. And so that's what I've learned from the good directors. And maybe it was good that, even though I wanted to, that I didn't get to direct until late in life, because I'd been able to watch all these great directors, how they solve problems, how they related to actors, how they communicate with crews. You learn from when people don't do that very well as well, sometimes more. It's like, oh, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make sure I
Yeah.
don't do that. It's just, so I suppose from this one I learned how to deal with other situations I hadn't run into before, and hopefully that'll
Yeah.
serve me if I get a chance to
Yeah.
do another one.
Now you've obviously been asked a lot about potential return to Middle Earth lately, and I have to work in at least one Middle Earth question because my viewers will riot if I don't. I'm going to try to put a little twist on the question you've been asked a million times so far. Um, Now you said, as far as
Mm.
potential returning to Middle Earth, you're open to it if the situation is right. So my question is, if you were approached, what kinds of things would you be looking for in a story for it to be something that you would be interested in signing on for?
Well, I mean, generally speaking, I would like it to feel like a Tolkien story, the look and feel of it. But first of all, the way it reads, that it feels connected, consistent with what Tolkien was writing about, his source
Yeah.
material, what he was trying to say, And I would think that the people, if it's Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh, Philippa Boyens, and people like that who are behind this, in some way, even if they're not directing
Yeah.
one of those stories, they're going to make sure that it has that feel. I mean, they certainly got the look and feel of Tolkien. It felt right, even though they did some things that weren't in the Lord of the Rings. The
Right.
look and feel of everything they did was respectful of Tolkien's um, storytelling, I think. And so it would be that first and foremost.
All right. So one last question in the Middle Earth sphere, and then we'll wrap up here. Um, so obviously, you've got a couple films directing under your belt now. Hypothetically speaking, could you see a future involvement in the director's chair on a Middle Earth project, or do you see yourself focusing more on your own original stories when you're behind the camera?
Well, you never know. I'm open to it. I mean, one of the stories I have that I'm trying to get made is an adaptation I wrote from a novel, like material that I didn't originally write. So you never know. I'm open to directing someone else's script, of course. Yeah, I mean, just depends on what the story is. It takes, no matter how much help you have and how good a team you have, any story you set out to direct, if you're going to do it properly, you need to be there from start to finish, right through the editing, right through everything, presenting it, shepherding that story all the way, whether you've written it or not. And so that's easily a couple of years
Yeah.
of your life. And so you have to be sure, I think, that it's something you really want to do. Of course, some people direct for different reasons. Oh, I just want to try this because it'd be fun, or I want to do it because I'm going to get paid well. I wouldn't do it for those reasons because it's just too much work. You want to do something you feel at least has a chance to be worthy. In this
Yeah.
case, worthy of the source material, and that's you know, if we're talking about something connected to Tolkien, it's a big audience that's will be expecting to see that and
Yeah.
have certain standards, I suppose, certain expectations, and so you don't want to let them down. You got to be there full on all the way. So I'm always careful. I've been that way unless I was out of money or something. But I've been fortunate. I've been able to do that as an actor for years, which is to wait until I found something that I really thought would be challenging and a chance to be good anyway,
Yeah.
or waited until it found me. So same
Yeah.
goes for directing.
Great. Now we talked about the film, now being out on digital. There's also the soundtrack that is out. And I almost forgot to mention this, but you composed, but then you also performed a number of instruments for this as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean I composed the music on the piano and then adapted that to the cello, which is the heart of the score, really. Cameron Stone, who some people may know, those opening cello music from Game of Thrones. That's
Mm.
him, and he's an incredibly gifted, classically trained cellist. Um, really great player, beautiful instrument too. Really old. I think it's from the early 1700s or something, or maybe even older. The cello he has, and that's what he plays on our
Wow.
score. And then the violin, Scarlett Rivera. Some may know her from her collaborations in the 70s with Bob Dylan.
Okay.
Really great, very skilled, classically trained, but also able to play, that sort of Appalachian style, sort of Celtic rhythms, that you hear in the score. So we adapted what I came up with on the piano to their instruments. And then, yeah, there's some, I mean, I played some bass and some guitar and a little percussion as well, but mostly what I played was piano. And originally, the idea at first, but you never know, you have to be open-minded, was to not have any piano
Mm.
in the score, really, other than the saloon piano. Um, and But they liked it, Cameron and in particular, but also Scarlett liked the way it sounded. in conjunction with the cello and the violin in some cases, and sometimes on its own. When I was showing them stuff, and I said, and in the end, I agreed with them. I said, yeah, okay. So the piano features several pieces also, and it wasn't just the instrument for composing. It ended up being one of the important instruments in the score as well.
Yeah.
And I really liked that. And we had fun. We got to the point where a couple of pieces we recorded live together, where you can't separate the tracks. That's what you get. And there's a couple of pieces that we did that way, where I did that with Cameron, for example. And I really enjoyed that process because it was in a way it was part of the screenplay. I had the screenplay and I sat down with him. I said, okay, I don't. There's a lot of these scenes and sequences I don't foresee any music in, but
Mm.
there's the ones that I do want to have music in, that I know we're going to use music in. These are the melodies, and so we went one by one. This transition or this scene, and this is what's happening in the scene. Literally reading the script, and so this is the tone, and this is the reason for this instrumentation and this melody and so forth. And this theme has to do with her, or this theme has to do with you know, Olga or someone else.
Yeah.
And that was really fun. So from the screenplay went into the music, and then the music went back into the screenplay, so to speak, just before the shoot, because in pre-production I played what we'd recorded
Mm.
and mixed, and had it all kind of done. We made some adjustments in editing just for timing, but
Yeah.
and I played a little bit more on a few pieces later on that I needed to extend, but it was pretty much what you hear in the movie, and it was great. It was interesting. It was easier to explain in some cases why I didn't want too many shots in a particular sequence,
Mm.
or why I wanted the rhythm to be a certain way. Um, it made it much clearer. So then it went back into the screenplay. It was always part of the writing. I look at all of that. The shooting is part of the writing. As you're shooting, you make adjustments. It always
Yeah.
happens on shoots, unless it's a writer director who's totally inflexible, which I think is not a good idea.
Mm.
Who doesn't adapt if an actress says, "Oh, I don't know, what about this word instead?" Or I feel funny, or you just hear an actor, you really listen to them, and you realize, okay, they're getting this across
Mm.
with 3 of those 5 lines. I don't even need those other two.
Yeah.
And so you keep writing as you're shooting, and then in editing, you're writing again. And with the music, it was being part of the screenplay. Just like there's a couple scenes that are on the DVD that just came out, the Blu-ray of
Yeah.
the movie. There's 3 deleted scenes, which we mixed and color corrected, and they're same quality as the movie. And they're great scenes, but they just didn't help move the story
Mm.
forward in the right way. And on their own, they're good. And the same thing happened. There was a couple of pieces of music that were recorded, which I was really fond of, but in the end, they didn't seem to what was happening in the scene and the way, particularly Vicky, what she was getting across. She was getting it across and didn't need any music.
Yeah.
So yeah, that happens. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny you say, I was talking with someone earlier today who'd also seen the film. We were talking about how much nonverbal Vicky is able to convey in a few particular scenes
Mhm.
where she doesn't really need much, if any, lines at all. And it's really, really great work. Well, folks, before we sign off,
Mhm.
I want you to know that Vigo has been very kind, and we're actually going to be giving away a limited number of signed copies of the Dead Don't Hurt soundtrack. So go to the link in the description. It'll tell you how to enter there. So you could walk away. There you go. There's a Vigo. It's got a nice little heart next to his signature. So you get love from Vigo in your signed copy of the soundtrack there. The Dead Don't Hurt is now out on digital as well, guys. Check it out. Go buy it, stream it, get the Blu-ray, get the physical. You can see the deleted scenes that way that we were just talking about. Vigo, thanks so much again for taking the time out from your day and
Yeah.
joining us to chat a bit.
Thanks for your time. It was very nice talking with you, and enjoy what's left of summer.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.